Salam everyone, it's Keely, Maryum. Welcome to my channel. As you can probably tell by the title of this video, today I am sharing tips on how to prepare for Ramadan. This is definitely something that we should be thinking about already. So I'm basically just sharing some tips that I've learned over the years that I think are helpful, and I think this can be good for both born Muslims and reverts as well. So my first tip is one that I think is pretty easy to integrate into your everyday life, and that is to watch lectures or listen to podcasts that talk about the reasons why we celebrate Ramadan, the reason why we are fasting. I think it's important to go over this each year, even if you do know the reasons or you think you remember the reasons. I think it's important to always remind yourself just to make sure, and it helps you kind of to prepare and to get into the right headspace. There's a lot of lectures out there right now on YouTube that you can watch, even from past years or from the current year. A lot of scholars have come out with videos lately. I think this is easier to integrate into your everyday life because you can kind of just like have this on while you're maybe like doing chores, like folding laundry or something like that, and you can also gain some additional knowledge. I find personally for me that listening to Islamic lectures, and not just necessarily ones about Ramadan, although I do like to listen to ones about Ramadan, but also to just listen to lectures about Islamic knowledge in general, I find that that really helps me to get into the headspace for Ramadan and to get into the mindset for fasting. And it just makes me like really excited for the upcoming year for Ramadan. Also, a lot of the Ramadan lectures, they usually give you tips on how to prepare as well. So I find that really helpful, and yeah, I really recommend doing that. So my second tip is to set realistic goals. And the key here is realistic goals, but you also want to make sure that they challenge yourself to a degree. So you want to make sure that it's something that you think that you can accomplish, but not something that's too easy where it's just not really challenging you at all and it's not really putting you outside of your comfort zone. I think that's really important. You kind of want to like test yourself and see how much better you can do, because the point is to really like better yourself, and it's not to really just do something that you think is easy or an easy goal or like an easy way out in a way. It's also important to kind of put an action plan to this, so like what kind of steps you're going to take. So like writing them down is like really important in this way, because then you can come up with the individual steps that are needed to accomplish these goals. For example, let's say that you want to learn how to pray. Maybe you don't know how to pray yet, maybe you're new. It would be important to kind of like break that down into steps, into what part you want to learn first. Maybe you want to learn the actions that you have to do in prayer. Then maybe from that point you want to start actually putting the words to the actions, and you just kind of break that up into small sections. By the way, I do have a previous video on how I learned how to pray and the steps that I took to do that. If you're interested, I'll put it like in the description box. And so it is important to remember that for everybody, these goals can look different. Yours might look different from another person's. We're all at different stages in our faith. And so it's also important not to drag other people down if they have goals that might look different from yours, and not to compare yourself to others. Like if their goals look different from yours, and they're maybe at like a place that you want to be at one day, and maybe you're just not quite there yet. So it is important not to put yourself or other people down for where you're at faith-wise, because we're all just kind of like trying to do better. Also can be helpful to start working on your goals now rather than having to do them in Ramadan. And you also don't have to make goals just for Ramadan. You can make goals all throughout the year. It doesn't have to be just at a specific time, obviously. But yeah, it can be really helpful to just start working on your goals now. That way, maybe you have a little bit less pressure during Ramadan. You don't really have to necessarily put them off. You can just start working on them right away. So now my third tip is sort of like a social media cleanse. Maybe you want to spend less time on social media, or maybe you want to spend no time at all on social media. This is something like I know I need to work on. Social media addiction is definitely real, and there's definitely more beneficial ways to spend our time, especially during Ramadan, so that maybe you limit your time on social media starting from now. I know that there are apps where you can kind of limit the amount of time that you spend on your phone. It'll kind of like prevent you from opening apps. I definitely need to download one of those again. I used to have one, just so that we can spend more time doing beneficial deeds rather than just sitting and like mindlessly scrolling. That way we can make good use of our time. Obviously you don't have to do this. This is just like a suggestion. I'm not forcing this on anybody. And it is important to remember that a lot of the times content on social media is prohibited content. Like a lot of the things that you see on there are not permissible in Islam. I'm not going to go into what's permissible and what's not. You should research that on your own. You should, you know, talk to scholars about that. I'm not a scholar, so I'm not going to go into that. Another way that I think you could do a social media cleanse, if you don't really feel like you're ready to spend less time on social media, or you think you're already spending less time on social media, which good for you, that's awesome. So one thing that I think could be good to consider doing is to unfollow accounts that are not beneficial, or maybe have haram or prohibited content, or things that are just not beneficial for you or is just a waste of time, and to maybe instead follow more beneficial accounts that have Islamic knowledge or things like that, where you could actually learn. And instead of spending your time in a way that is kind of wasteful and maybe not good, you can now spend your time in a little bit more of a beneficial way. And so I think that starting off early with like a social media cleanse before it's time for Ramadan can maybe make it a little bit easier, even if you want to start out gradually with like a smaller step. Again, just like what I said with the goals, this isn't something that you have to necessarily just implement during Ramadan. This is something that you can start at any point in the year, and you can kind of like change your goals. With this social media cleanse, you can maybe make a more restrictive social media cleanse. It just kind of depends on, like, obviously your lifestyle and what you hope to achieve by doing this social media cleanse. Now, my final tip is to learn or maybe relearn beneficial deeds during Ramadan. So there are certain times when it's extra beneficial to make dua, so you might want to do that. So you might want to look into those sort of deeds, like when it might be additionally beneficial to do certain things. So I think it's really good to kind of remind ourselves of those every year, because, you know, it's been a while since we've fasted, since we've done Ramadan, so it is important to kind of remind ourselves of these so that we can, you know, maybe do these deeds again, and maybe like write those down as like a little reminder. That way we can do extra deeds and we can gain rewards from those as well. Yeah, that's all that I wanted to share with you today. If you have any additional tips that you think are helpful, that you find helpful, that you think somebody else might, please leave them in the comments, and then we can all maybe gain some benefit from it, inshallah. So thank you all for watching, and please make sure to like and subscribe.